The October wind cut through Sarah Coleman's threadbare shawl like a blade, carrying with it the scent of wood smoke and the promise of an early winter. She stood before Bent's trading post, her calloused hands clutching a worn leather satchel that contained everything she owned in this world, which wasn't much. 3 silver coins, a faded daguerreotype of her late husband Thomas, and a letter from his creditors back in Kansas that might as well have been her death warrant. The trading post squatted like a weathered beast against the endless Texas prairie, its adobe walls scarred by wind and time. Smoke rose from the chimney, and through the single window, Sarah could see the warm glow of lantern light. Men's voices drifted out, punctuated by rough laughter and the clink of bottles. She'd been standing here for near an hour, working up the courage to push through that heavy wooden door. "Thomas, you fool," she whispered to the wind. "What am I supposed to do now?" Her husband had been dead 3 weeks. Fever took him 2 days out of Fort Worth, and the wagon train hadn't even slowed down for a proper burial. The trail boss, a hard man named Morrison, had made it clear that winter was coming, and they couldn't afford delays. Sarah could either keep up or stay behind with her husband's grave. She'd kept up for 5 days, walking alongside the wagons with blisters bleeding through her boots. But when young Billy Hutchins came down with the same fever that killed Thomas, Morrison made his choice. The sick boy got the wagon space that Sarah had been sharing with the Hutchins family. Mary Hutchins had wept as she pressed 2 days' worth of hardtack into Sarah's hands, but her boy came first. Sarah understood. She'd have made the same choice. Now the trading post door swung open, and a mountain of a man stepped out, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Jacob Brennan, the owner, looked her up and down with the same expression he might give a mangy dog. "You still out here, woman? I told you this morning I don't run no charity house." "Mr. Brennan, please." Sarah's voice came out smaller than she intended. "I'm not asking for charity. I can work, I can cook, clean, mend clothes. With what? You got no supplies, no tools, nothing but the rags on your back." Brennan spat into the dirt. "Winter's coming fast and I got paying customers to think about. Can't have some desperate widow scaring off the trappers and traders." From inside the trading post, a gruff voice called out, "Brennan, where's that whiskey you promised?" "Coming!" he hollered back, then fixed Sarah with a cold stare. "I'm telling you for the last time, move along. There's a settlement about 40 miles south. Maybe they'll take pity on you." 40 miles. Sarah's legs already ached from walking, and she hadn't eaten since yesterday morning. The hardtack Mary Hutchins had given her was long gone. "I won't make it 40 miles in this weather. That ain't my concern." Brennan turned to go back inside, then paused. "Though I suppose if you're planning to die out here, do it downwind. Don't want the smell bothering my customers." The door slammed shut with a finality that echoed across the prairie. Sarah stood alone in the gathering darkness, watching the warm light spill from the windows. Inside she could hear men talking and laughing, their bellies full and their futures secure. Out here the wind picked up, sending tumbleweeds skittering across the hardpan like lost souls. She pulled her shawl tighter and walked to the corner of the building, where a small overhang provided some shelter from the wind. This was where she'd spent the last 2 nights, curled up like a wounded animal, listening to the sounds of warmth and companionship that she was no longer welcome to share. The stars emerged one by one in the vast Texas sky, cold and distant as the people inside the trading post. Sarah pulled the daguerreotype from her satchel and studied Thomas's face in the dim starlight. He'd been a good man, a dreamer who'd believed they could build something better out west. Now he was 6 feet under somewhere along the trail, and she was about to join him. "I tried, Thomas," she whispered. "I really tried." Dawn broke gray and cold over the prairie, painting the sky the color of old pewter. Sarah woke to the sound of horses, not the familiar clatter of shod hooves, but the softer rhythm of unshod ponies moving across grass. She pressed herself deeper into the shadows of the trading post's overhang, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3 riders approached from the east, their silhouettes dark against the morning light. Even from a distance, Sarah could see they weren't white men. They rode with a fluid grace that spoke of lives spent in the saddle, their long hair flowing behind them like black water. Comanche. Sarah had heard the stories, every settler had, tales of raids, of captives taken, of homesteads burned to ash. Her mouth went dry as the riders drew closer, and she could make out details that made her blood run cold. War paint streaked across high cheekbones, eagle feathers woven into braided hair, and weapons that caught the morning light like hungry eyes. The lead rider was tall even on horseback, his shoulders broad beneath a buckskin shirt decorated with intricate beadwork. A scar ran from his left temple to his jawline, and his dark eyes missed nothing as they swept across the trading post. When his gaze found Sarah huddled in the shadows, she felt exposed as a rabbit before a hawk, but he didn't reach for his weapons. Instead, he raised his hand in what she recognized as a peaceful gesture and dismounted with practiced ease. His companions remained on their horses, watchful but not threatening. The trading post door creaked open, and Jacob Brennan stepped out, his demeanor completely changed from the night before. Where he'd been harsh and dismissive with Sarah, he now wore the forced smile of a man trying to hide his fear. "Tall Bear," Brennan said, his voice carefully neutral. "Been a while since you visited us." So this was Tall Bear. Sarah had heard the name whispered in frightened tones around campfires, the Comanche warrior who could track a man across solid rock, who'd never been defeated in single combat. But seeing him now, Sarah was struck not by his fearsome reputation, but by the quiet dignity in his bearing. "I come to trade," Tall Bear said, his English heavily accented but clear. "Buffalo hides for rifles. Ammunition." "You know I can't sell you rifles," Brennan replied quickly. "Army finds out, they'll shut me down." Tall Bear's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his stance. "You sell to other men. Why not to me?" "Because other men ain't—" Brennan caught himself, glancing nervously at the mounted warriors. "Because it's different and you know it. Different because I am Comanche." The question hung in the air like smoke. Sarah watched, fascinated despite her fear, as Tall Bear exposed the hypocrisy that everyone pretended didn't exist. He was calm, articulate, and more dignified than any white man she'd encountered since leaving Kansas. "Look, I can trade for other things," Brennan said, eager to change the subject. "Blankets, tools, coffee. I have no need for coffee." Tall Bear's gaze drifted back to Sarah, and she saw something unexpected in his dark eyes. Not cruelty or hunger, but curiosity. "What of the woman?" Sarah's breath caught. Brennan followed Tall Bear's gaze and scowled. "Her? She's nothing. Just a widow with no sense, trying to survive on charity. She sleeps in the cold. That's her choice. I told her to move on." Tall Bear studied Sarah for a long moment, and she found herself unable to look away. There was intelligence in his eyes, and something else, a recognition of suffering that transcended race or culture. When he finally spoke, his words were directed at her, not Brennan. "You are alone." It wasn't a question. Sarah managed a small nod, surprised by the gentleness in his voice. "Your man, dead," she whispered. "Fever took him." Tall Bear nodded slowly, as if this confirmed something he'd already suspected. He reached into a leather pouch at his belt and withdrew something that made Sarah's heart skip. A knife, but not just any knife. The blade was steel, well forged and sharp, with a handle carved from bone and wrapped in sinew. Intricate designs had been burned into the bone, and small brass studs caught the morning light. "This is for you," he said, extending the knife toward Sarah. Brennan stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Now hold on there. I do not speak to you," Tall Bear said without looking at him. His attention remained fixed on Sarah. "A woman alone needs protection. This blade will not fail you." Sarah's hands trembled as she reached out, hardly believing what was happening. The knife was beautiful, clearly crafted with great skill and care. As her fingers closed around the handle, she felt its perfect balance, the way it seemed to fit her hand as if it had been made for her. "I can't. I have nothing to give you in return." For the first time, Tall Bear's stern expression softened slightly. "You have courage. That is worth more than silver." "She's got no courage," Brennan snorted. "She's been sniveling out here for days." Tall Bear's gaze shifted to Brennan, and the temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "You would put a woman out to die in the cold? She ain't my responsibility. Among my people, we do not abandon the helpless." The warrior's voice carried a weight that made Brennan take a step backward. "Perhaps the Comanche are more civilized than you believe." Sarah clutched the knife to her chest, overwhelmed by the unexpected kindness. "Thank you," she managed. Tall Bear inclined his head slightly. "You will need a name to go with the blade. Sarah Coleman died with her husband. The woman who stands alone needs a new name." "What do you mean?" "Stands alone," he said simply. "That is what I see when I look at you. A woman who endures when others would fall." The knife changed everything, not just because it was a weapon, though Sarah slept better knowing steel lay within her reach, but because it represented something she'd almost forgotten existed: respect. For 3 days after Tall Bear's visit, She found herself touching the bone handle like a talisman, drawing strength from the weight of it at her side. But respect didn't fill an empty belly or ward off the October chill that bit deeper each night. Sarah knew she had perhaps a week before the cold would claim her. Knife or no knife, she'd tried begging at the trading post door twice more, only to have Brennan threaten to set the dogs on her. The other travelers who stopped for supplies looked through her like she was already a ghost. On the fourth morning, she woke to find a small bundle beside her makeshift shelter. Wrapped in soft doe skin was a piece of dried meat, hard as leather, but rich with salt and smoke. Pemmican, she realized, the concentrated food that could sustain a warrior for days. There was also a small clay pot filled with rendered fat, and something else that made her breath catch. Seeds. Dozens of them, carefully sorted and tied in separate cloth pouches. Sunflower, squash, beans, crops that could grow in harsh soil if a person knew how to tend them. At the bottom of the bundle lay a piece of birch bark, with marks burned into its surface. Not words, but pictures. A woman kneeling by a stream, hands cupped to catch water. A fire built in a specific pattern. Plants with roots exposed, showing which parts were safe to eat. Sarah looked around the empty prairie, her heart pounding. There was no sign of Tallbear or his companions, but she knew who had left these gifts. The question was why. She spent the morning studying the bark drawings, tracing the burned lines with her finger. Each symbol seemed to tell a story of survival, of finding life in places where others saw only death. By afternoon, she'd made her decision. Following the crude map on the birch bark, Sarah walked half a mile from the trading post to a small creek that meandered through a grove of cottonwoods. The water ran clear and cold, and she could see the glint of fish in the deeper pools. More importantly, the trees would provide shelter from the wind, and deadfall would mean fuel for fires. She made her first camp that evening, using the knife to cut branches and build a lean-to against the largest cottonwood. Her hands, soft from years of indoor work, split and bled as she worked, but she didn't stop. The physical pain was nothing compared to the hollowness she'd felt begging at Brennan's door. The next morning she woke to find Tallbear sitting cross-legged beside her dying fire, as silent as morning mist. Sarah's hand went instinctively to her knife, then stopped when she saw he'd brought more gifts. A small iron pot, a handful of fish hooks, and a length of sinew that could serve as line. "You moved from the trading post," he observed. "I'm not welcome there." Sarah sat up, pulling her shawl tight around her shoulders. "Though I suppose you already knew that. A wise woman learns when to retreat." Tallbear's dark eyes studied her lean-to with what might have been approval, but survival requires more than shelter. He stood and walked to the creek's edge, gesturing for her to follow. "Your people fish with metal hooks and line, good for deep water. But in shallow places there are other ways." What followed was unlike any lesson Sarah had ever received. Tallbear showed her how to read the water, how to spot the shadows that meant fish were resting in the shade of overhanging banks. He taught her to construct a simple trap from willow branches, weaving them into a funnel that would catch fish, but not let them escape. "Patience," he said, as Sarah struggled with the slippery branches. "The creek will feed you, but only if you listen to its rhythm." He was right. By evening, the trap had caught 3 small fish, and Sarah felt a pride deeper than anything she'd experienced as a proper housewife. She'd provided for herself, using skills that connected her to the land in ways her former life never had. Over the following days, Tallbear appeared at sunrise and disappeared at sunset, always bringing knowledge instead of charity. He showed her which plants had edible roots, how to strip the inner bark from cottonwoods to make a nutritious tea, and which mushrooms were safe to eat. He taught her to read the sky for weather signs, to find her direction by the stars, and to move through the wilderness without leaving obvious tracks. "Why are you helping me?" Sarah asked one evening as they shared a small fire. She'd grown comfortable with his presence, though she still marveled at how he could appear and vanish like smoke. Tallbear was quiet for so long that Sarah thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his voice carried a weight of old pain. "I had a sister once. White soldiers came to our camp during a winter when we were at peace. They said we had stolen horses, though we had stolen nothing. In the fighting, my sister was shot. She crawled into the brush to hide, but the soldiers found her." He paused, staring into the flames. "She was dying, and she begged them for water. They laughed and left her to die alone. When we found her body, her lips were black with thirst." Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. "I'm sorry." Her name was Moon on Water. She was 17 winters old, and she had done nothing wrong except be born Comanche. Tallbear looked at Sarah directly. When I see you cast out by your own people, I think of her. I think that perhaps showing mercy to one who suffers might honor her memory." The fire crackled between them, and Sarah understood that she'd been given more than survival skills. She'd been given a glimpse into the heart of a man who had every reason to hate her people, yet chose compassion instead. "Stands alone," she said softly, testing the name he'd given her. "I think I'm beginning to understand what that means." Tall Bear nodded. "It means you do not break, even when the world tries to break you. It means you find strength in places others see only weakness." As the stars emerged overhead, Sarah realized that for the first time since Thomas's death, she wasn't just surviving, she was learning to live. The trouble started when Running Wolf arrived. Sarah was tending her fish trap in the pre-dawn darkness when she heard horses approaching. Not the measured pace of a single rider, but the urgent gallop of men with purpose. She crouched behind the cottonwood grove, her hand on the knife Tall Bear had given her, and watched as 3 warriors thundered toward the creek. The lead rider was younger than Tall Bear, perhaps 25 summers, with a lean frame and eyes that burned with barely contained anger. Even in the dim light, Sarah could see the family resemblance. The same strong jaw, the same proud bearing, but where Tall Bear radiated calm authority, this man seemed to vibrate with restless energy. "Brother!" Running Wolf called out in Comanche, his voice sharp with accusation. "We must speak." Tall Bear emerged from the shadows where he'd been checking Sarah's snares, moving with his usual unhurried grace. "Running Wolf, you ride hard in the darkness. What brings you here? You know why I come." Running Wolf's gaze swept the camp and fixed on Sarah's lean-to. "The council speaks of nothing but your strange behavior. They say you give weapons to our enemies, that you teach white woman our ways." Sarah's blood chilled. She didn't need to understand every word to grasp the hostility in Running Wolf's tone. The other 2 warriors, both young men with hard faces, nodded their agreement. "The council speaks of many things," Tall Bear replied evenly. "Not all of them are wise." "This woman is white." Running Wolf gestured toward Sarah's hiding place as if he could see through the trees. "Her people drive us from our lands, kill our children, break every treaty they make, and you give her gifts like she is family. She is no threat to our people." "She is a threat to you," Running Wolf's voice rose. "Already there are whispers that grief for Moon on Water has made you weak, that you have forgotten who you are." Sarah saw Tall Bear's jaw tighten at the mention of his sister. "I have forgotten nothing." "Then why do you waste time with this white woman when our people need you?" Red Cloud's war grows stronger in the north. The Kiowa ask for our help against the buffalo soldiers, yet you play teacher to a woman who would see us all dead if it served her purpose. You do not know her." "I know enough." Running Wolf wheeled his horse closer to his brother. "Yesterday, 2 cavalry patrols passed through our territory. They ask questions about a missing woman, a widow who disappeared from a trading post. They offer reward money for information." Sarah's heart stopped. They were looking for her, but why? She was nobody, a woman with no family, no connections, no value to anyone. "The soldiers say she may have been taken by hostile Indians," Running Wolf continued. "They have orders to search every camp, every village. If they find her with us—" "They will find nothing," Tall Bear said quietly. "She is not with us. But she is under your protection. When they discover this, they will have excuse to attack. How many of our people will die because you chose to help one white woman?" The question hung in the air like poisoned smoke. Sarah felt the weight of it crushing down on her chest. She'd been so focused on her own survival that she hadn't considered the danger her presence might bring to Tall Bear. If soldiers were looking for her, if they blamed the Comanche for her disappearance. "The woman has done nothing wrong," Tall Bear said. "Wrong." One of the other warriors spoke for the first time, his voice thick with contempt. "Her people murdered my cousin at Sand Creek. They hung his scalp from their horses like a trophy. What does she care for right and wrong? She is not responsible for the actions of all white men, just as we are not responsible for the actions of all Comanche." "You speak like a white man now," Running Wolf said bitterly. "Have you forgotten that it was white soldiers who killed Moon on Water? That it was white disease that took our father? That it is white greed that drives us ever westward?" Sarah couldn't bear to listen anymore. She stepped out from behind the trees, her chin raised despite the terror coursing through her veins. 3 sets of hostile eyes fixed on her immediately, and she saw hands drift toward weapons. "Stop," she said, her voice carrying farther than she'd expected. "This is my fault. I'll leave." "You will not," Tall Bear said without taking his eyes off his brother. "I have to. They're right. I'm bringing danger to your people. I won't be responsible for anyone else getting hurt because of me. Running Wolf studied her with grudging surprise. At least she has sense. Where will you go? Tall Bear asked. Sarah looked out at the endless prairie, painted silver by the rising sun. She had no horse, no supplies beyond what Tall Bear had given her, and winter was coming fast. The nearest settlement was 40 miles away, and she had no guarantee they'd welcome her any more than Brennan had. I'll manage, she said. I learned from the best. The soldiers will find you, Running Wolf pointed out. They will ask questions. What will you tell them? The truth, that I've been surviving on my own, that no one helped me. Sarah met his gaze steadily. I won't mention any of you. And if they don't believe you, then that's my problem, not yours. For the first time since his arrival, Running Wolf looked uncertain. He'd expected her to cower, to plead, to prove every stereotype he held about white women. Instead, she stood ready to sacrifice herself to protect his people. Brother, he said quietly to Tall Bear, this woman is not what I expected. She is exactly what I told you she was, Tall Bear replied, strong enough to stand alone. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah began gathering her few possessions, folding them into the doe-skin bundle Tall Bear had given her. Every movement felt like a small death, but she forced herself to keep working. She'd learned to survive in the wilderness, and she'd learned something even more valuable, that dignity mattered more than safety. There is another way, Tall Bear said suddenly. Running Wolf turned to him, eyes narrowing. What way? She could come with us, to the winter camp, hide among our people until the soldiers stop looking. Are you mad? Bring a white woman into our village? She would not be white woman. She would be Comanche. The words fell like stones into still water. Sarah stared at Tall Bear, hardly able to believe what she was hearing. Running Wolf's face went through a series of expressions, shock, anger, and finally something that might have been grudging respect. You would adopt her into the tribe? I would sponsor her. If she proves worthy, if she truly embraces our ways, she could become one of us. Her past would be forgotten. She would be stands alone, daughter of no one, sister to all. Sarah felt tears stinging her eyes. You would do that for me? I would do that for the woman who chose to face death rather than bring harm to my people. Running Wolf was quiet for a long moment, studying Sarah with new eyes. Finally he spoke. The council will have to decide, and it will not be easy. Many will oppose it. Let them oppose it, Tall Bear said. We are not so rich in courage that we can afford to waste it. The Comanche winter camp spread across a sheltered valley, like a constellation of buffalo hide and wooden poles. Sarah had never seen anything like it. Dozens of teepees arranged in careful family circles, smoke rising from cook fires, children playing between the lodges while their mothers worked on winter preparations. It was a functioning community, as organized and purposeful as any white settlement she'd known. But the eyes that followed her arrival were not welcoming. Stay close, Tall Bear murmured as they rode through the camp. Do not speak unless spoken to. Show respect, but do not cower. Sarah nodded, her hand unconsciously touching the knife at her belt. 3 weeks had passed since Running Wolf's visit, and she'd spent every day preparing for this moment. Tall Bear had taught her basic Comanche words, shown her how to sit properly in council, explained the complex web of relationships that governed tribal life. But no amount of preparation could ease the knot of fear in her stomach. The council lodge stood at the camp's center, larger than the others, and decorated with painted symbols that told the history of great battles and successful hunts. Warriors, elders, and respected women gathered outside, their faces painted with expressions ranging from curiosity to outright hostility. Sarah recognized some of them from Tall Bear's descriptions. Stone Bear, the war chief whose scars told stories of 20 years of fighting. Singing Bird, the medicine woman whose word carried weight in all matters of spiritual importance. And Grey Wolf, the eldest council member, whose memories reached back to the days before white men came to the plains. The woman waits outside, Stone Bear announced as they approached. This is men's council. The woman is the reason for council, Tall Bear replied calmly. She should hear what is said. She is white, spat a younger warrior Sarah didn't recognize. She has no place in our sacred lodge. If she is to become Comanche, she must learn our ways, Tall Bear countered. How can she learn if she is not permitted to witness them? Grey Wolf raised his hand for silence. Let her enter, but let her remain silent. She may listen, but she may not speak unless given permission. Sarah followed Tall Bear into the lodge, acutely aware of the hostile gazes that followed her every step. The interior was dim, lit only by a central fire that cast dancing shadows on the painted walls. The assembled council sat in a circle, and Sarah was directed to a spot behind Tall Bear, neither fully included nor entirely excluded. "Tall Bear," Grey Wolf began, his voice carrying the authority of age and wisdom, "you ask us to do something that has never been done. You ask us to accept a white woman as one of our own. Explain to us why this should be." Tall Bear stood, his posture straight and proud. "Honored elders, I ask you to look beyond the color of her skin and see what lies beneath. This woman was abandoned by her own people, left to die in the cold, yet she did not break. She learned to survive, to find strength in hardship. She has shown courage, wisdom, and loyalty." "Loyalty to whom?" Stone Bear challenged. "To us, or to the white soldiers who hunt for her? 3 days ago, a cavalry patrol came within a mile of our scouts. They questioned our young men about a missing white woman. She could have revealed herself, could have returned to her people's protection. Instead, she chose to remain hidden, to risk death rather than bring danger to us." "Pretty words," said the warrior, who had objected to Sarah's presence. "But words are wind. What has she actually done to prove her worth?" Sarah felt the weight of expectation pressing down on her. She'd known this moment would come, but she hadn't expected it to feel like a trial for her very soul. "She has lived among us for 3 weeks," Tall Bear continued. "She has learned our language, our customs, our ways of survival. She has shown respect for our elders, kindness to our children, and willingness to work alongside our women. More importantly, she has shown that she understands sacrifice." "Any woman can learn to work," Stone Bear said dismissively. "What we need to know is whether she can fight, whether she can protect the tribe if need be." "I can fight," Sarah said quietly. The lodge fell silent. Every eye turned to her, and she realized she'd spoken without permission. Grey Wolf's expression was unreadable. "You were told to remain silent," he said. "I was, honored elder. But I heard a question about my ability to defend this tribe, and I felt compelled to answer. And how would you defend us, white woman?" With pretty words and tears, Sarah stood slowly, her hand moving to her knife. "With steel, if necessary. With my life, if required." The blade sang as she drew it, and several warriors tensed. But instead of threatening anyone, Sarah reversed her grip and offered the knife to Grey Wolf, handle first. "This blade was a gift from Tall Bear, given when I had nothing. It has fed me, protected me, and reminded me every day that I am not the helpless woman who begged at the trading post. If the council judges me unworthy, I return it freely. But if you accept me as Comanche, I swear by this steel that I will use it to defend my adopted people until my last breath." Grey Wolf studied her for a long moment, then took the knife. He examined the carved bone handle, the brass studs, the keen edge that had been maintained with obvious care. "This is fine work," he said finally. "Tall Bear crafted it himself." "I know," Sarah replied, "and I know the honor he did me by giving it." "Do you understand what you ask?" Singing Bird spoke for the first time, her voice soft but penetrating. "To become Comanche is to leave your old life behind completely. Sarah Coleman must die so that Stands Alone can live. Your past, your family, your people, all of it becomes like smoke. Can you do this?" Sarah thought of Thomas, buried somewhere along the trail, of her childhood home in Missouri, of the dreams she'd once harbored of a civilized life in a proper house. Then she thought of the nights she'd spent learning to read the stars, of the pride she'd felt when she caught her first fish, of the community that had welcomed her despite every reason to reject her. "Sarah Coleman is already dead," she said. "She died when the wagon train left her behind. What stands before you now is a woman who has learned that family is not about blood, it's about choice. I choose to be Comanche. I choose to make your struggles my struggles, your enemies my enemies, your children my children." The council exchanged glances, and Sarah could see the weight of decision in their faces. This was about more than just her. It was about the future of their people, about whether adaptation and inclusion could coexist with tradition and survival. "There will be a test," Grey Wolf said finally. "Tomorrow, when the sun reaches its highest point, you will face a trial. If you pass, you will be welcomed as a daughter of the Comanche. If you fail—" "I understand," Sarah said. As the council dispersed, Tall Bear approached her. "You spoke well," he said. "But the test tomorrow will be more than words." "What kind of test?" "That is for the council to decide, but whatever they choose, remember, you are not the same woman who arrived at the trading post. You are Stands Alone, and you have already proven your worth a dozen times over." That night, as Sarah lay in the small lodge that had been provided for her, She listened to the sounds of the camp settling into sleep. Children's laughter, the soft murmur of lovers, the distant howl of a coyote on the plains, all of it felt like home in a way that no white settlement ever had. Tomorrow would bring whatever test the council had devised. She might fail, might find herself exiled to face the approaching winter alone. But for the first time since Thomas's death, she felt truly alive. She had found her place in the world, and no test could take that away from her. Sarah Coleman was dead. Long live stands alone.